So, hi everyone. I'm Joel. I'm part of the R3 product management team, and I'm here with Thomas Schroeter, who's an engineer in our Notaries team.
That's right.
So, we wanted to record this video to tell you about a new feature that's coming in Corda Enterprise 4.3, and that's the ability to store notary keys in an HSM.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can recap here. So there's, you have a network, you have many Corda nodes, and then you have notaries on the network, and each notary will be made up of one or more notary worker nodes. So often in a highly available setup, in an enterprise deployment, you might have 3 or 5 worker nodes, so that if one is unavailable, you're still able to service notarization requests. But one thing that's interesting about notaries today is that they've actually got 2 identities. So whereas a regular node will have one identity, just the node identity, there's 2 in the case of the notary. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Thomas?
Yes, we have one identity, that's the notary service identity, that's used specifically to sign the notarization requests.
Uh-huh.
And the other identity is really used for peer-to-peer messaging, like with the regular node.
Okay. And so each of these identities will correspond to its own key, right? Or set of keys.
That's right, yes. So we have the distributed notary key, which is used to sign the notarization requests. And then we have more keys that are just used for the peer-to-peer messaging capability of the notary worker nodes.
Yeah. Okay.
And they are usually stored in the same keystore, for example, or they are stored in the same HSM if you're going to deploy using HSMs.
Yeah, so this is a new feature. So previously, the notary's keys, so the notary identity key, but also the shared key, had to be stored in a JKS file, right? A Java keystore file.
That's right, yes.
And what we've introduced in Corda Enterprise 4.3 is the ability to store that in an HSM instead. So what's the benefit of storing in an HSM over a Java keystore?
The private key material does not leave the HSM and it's not stored on the file system where other processes, for example, could read it or have access to the key material.
Yep. And this is especially important in the case of the notary's key because the notary's key is absolutely critical. So it's the notary's key that can dictate by signing a transaction whether the inputs are spent or unspent. So if someone was to compromise the notary's key, they could then allow double spends effectively. So this is really kind of a security improvement to make sure that to make it even harder to compromise the notary's private key material. And when we say private key material, that's really just the key, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Used to sign the notarization requests.
Exactly. And so for regular Corda nodes, we support quite a wide range of HSMs. So we've got Ultimaco, Gemalto, Securosys, Azure Key Vault. In the case of notaries, we started off just by adding support for 2. So for Azure Key Vault and for Securosys.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something we can increase over time. So we already have the implementations for nodes of these other HSMs. So as we go forward, we may look to expand the set of supported notary HSMs based on customer demand.
Okay, maybe I should clarify something when I'm saying signing the notarization request. We're actually signing the transactions that are. So we're validating transactions and we're signing the transactions. So we're adding the notary signature to the transactions when they come in sent by clients.
Yes.
Yeah, just to clarify a bit what I mean by signing the notarization requests. Actually,
yes.
The request to the notary contains a transaction that we validate in terms of the uniqueness of their input states, and then we sign this transaction. So we're adding the notary signature to the transaction to say is valid as seen by the notary, and then we send this back.
Yes. Exactly. And so one of the things about us today is, although we can see the notary workers have these 2 identities, so one is this shared identity and one of this is this node identity, they both need to be stored in the same place, right? We don't currently support having one in a Java key store and one in an HSM.
Yes, because the notary today is basically a regular node with notary capabilities, which is really built into the Corda jar, let's say, and we currently only support configuring one HSM or no HSM at all.
Mm-hmm.
So all key material will be stored in the same HSM or not in a HSM at all, or in the same key store in the file system.
Yeah, because that's interesting. So you said earlier that HSMs prevent you from extracting the private key material,
Right.
but one of these keys needs to be shared across several different worker notary
That's right.
worker nodes.
So the service identity key is shared among all the worker nodes that make up or form this notary service.
And so how do you get, if you can't get the key out, how do you make sure the key is shared between all the notary workers?
So this is really vendor dependent. So some HSMs support copying keys from one HSM to the next, but it's not something we are encouraging. So usually this is only possible for hardware HSMs if they share the same master key inside the HSM.
Uh-huh.
And for cloud HSMs, there is, for example, for Azure or Key Vault, there's a backup mechanism that can be used.
But also you have the option of allowing the notary worker nodes to share an HSM, right?
Exactly. So this is the preferred option because we don't need to copy the private key material from one HSM to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But this HSM should be highly available as well, otherwise it becomes a single point of failure.
Yeah.
And if this HSM is not available and it's the only HSM used by all the notary workers of the notary service, then the notary service will become unavailable because none of the notary workers are able to sign transactions anymore that they have verified.
But that unavailability doesn't endanger ledger integrity, ledger consistency anyway, right? It's just it stops things being spent with that notary for that time.
Exactly. So the clients or other Corda nodes that are trying to use the notary cannot get their transactions verified by the notary service.
And what does this mean in terms of performance? Because traditionally signing with an HSM would be slower than signing with something that's on your file system, right?
If this HSM is only reachable via the network, which is the typical case with most installations, then there's an additional round trip to go to the HSM, send over whatever bytes need to be signed, and then collect the signature.
Yes.
Or collect a response by the HSM and then respond to the client. So we are losing some performance, but we introduced a new feature that's really great. Maybe we can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So what's that new feature?
The new feature is actually multi-transaction signing. So we are able to sign the root of a Merkle tree in the HSM.
Uh-huh.
And the leaves of the Merkle tree would be multiple transaction hashes that are verified by the notary service.
And so how does that work? Does the notary build up a buffer of transactions and then send them all at once?
Yes, we do this for performance reasons anyways already. And now we are able to sign all valid transactions of this batch with one round trip to the HSM.
And what happens if you send that batch and one of them is a double spend and 99 are fine? Do you send a new batch? How does that work?
So you remove invalid transactions before sending this batch to the HSM. So we do.
Okay.
We basically do the verification first and collect valid transaction hashes or transaction IDs, and then send those valid ones of the original batch to the HSM for signing.
But it's still recommended, I guess, to. But the recommendation would still be to have the HSM locally. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, once you, let's say, invest in a highly available HSM, it's probably no longer local to all your notary workers. So this really depends on the deployment topology, because we also recommend putting the notary workers in separate data centers.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Well, so that's an overview of this feature that's coming in Corda Enterprise 4.3. So it's we've had hardware signing module support for regular nodes keys for a long time, and here we're adding the same support to notary clusters, and so in doing so we've had to solve a few problems around allowing nodes to share this HSM, and is around batching as well, as Thomas was describing. So making sure that the requirement to round trip to a remote service every time you want to sign doesn't impact the performance of the notary.
Right.